Good morning, Reptilians. Welcome back to my channel. Really quick, I'm back in front of my old recording space area, so we are good to go on my new office space. I have Goliath's tank right here, and yeah, as you guys know, in my opinion, one of the absolute easiest reptiles you can get are crested geckos. So this week I kind of wanted to talk about the differences and similarities between them and another gecko called the Gargoyle Gecko. Crested geckos and Gargoyle geckos are both from a place called New Caledonia, and since they are from the same area, that does mean that a lot of things between these two geckos are going to be pretty similar. I get questions about them all the time, so I thought I would put it all in a video. Some of this is going to be my opinion and what I have noticed being the difference between my crested gecko and my gargoyle gecko. But hopefully, if you are trying to make that decision between a crested gecko and a gargoyle gecko, maybe something that I'll say in this video will help you make up your mind. But anyway, let's get into it. First off is going to be the most noticeable difference between the two, and that is their appearance. Crested geckos are called crested geckos or eyelash geckos because they have those crests or eyelashes that go around their face. And gargoyle geckos basically look just like crested geckos, just minus those. Now, there are lots of color differences. You can get different morphs with the different geckos, and they're going to be about the same size. Gargoyle geckos get a little tiny bit bigger, more chubbier than bigger, but they're going to be about the same size. And with both of these guys, they are going to do something called firing up and firing down. And all that means is that when you look in at your animal and they are sleeping, they may look really dull. And then when they wake up and they get moving, their colors get brighter or darker or whatever color they're supposed to be. The slight difference that I've noticed here is that with crested geckos, they do get duller. With gargoyle geckos, they kind of almost turn white. They look like they're about to shed when they're fired down, and they kind of look like gargoyles. They look like stone creatures, and then when they fire up, those colors just pop, which is really cool to watch that transition. This section is super easy because it's just simply looking at them and seeing that they look different, so on to the next section. This next one probably has a lot to do with people's decisions of one over the other, and that is their price and availability. So crested geckos are the more popular pet, so they're going to be cheaper and they're going to be more readily available. Even chain pet stores sell crested geckos. Usually crested geckos, for just a basic normal crested gecko, they're going to be about $45 to $60 depending on where you get them, and a gargoyle gecko is going to start out around $150 to $250. That is a giant price difference, and just like all reptile morphs, the price only goes up from there, so definitely keep that in mind. Also, like I said, crested geckos are going to be more readily available because you can literally get them anywhere. Gargoyle geckos, on the other hand, are harder to find. Any kind of reptile show usually has them, usually any stand that is selling crested geckos. Most of them are also going to sell gargoyle geckos, but as far as just going to a pet store and getting them, especially chain pet stores and a lot of normal pet stores, you're not really going to run into them as much because they are less in demand than those crested geckos. The care of these guys, the care is super similar for both of them. Like I said, gargoyle geckos do get a little bit chubbier, but they stay about the same size. The humidity and temperature and tank size requirements are all going to be the same. They need a 10-gallon as a baby and at least an 18 by 18 by 24 as an adult. Humidity is going to be pretty high. They are both from New Caledonia, where they live in tropical rainforest, and the temperature is also super easy for these guys. They like room temperature. The mid to high 70s is good for them. I personally have noticed that my gargoyle gecko does like it a little warmer. I don't know if that's just her or if that is a normal thing for gargoyles, but I had put a heat pad, if you guys remember, in her tank back in the winter just to give her a little bit more heat, and it's still in there because she still uses it, but that is something that makes my crested and gargoyle different. One of the huge things with crested geckos versus gargoyle geckos, although I do not suggest putting most reptiles together in the same habitat. There are people that have successfully kept female crested geckos together, but with gargoyle geckos, that is a huge no. Gargoyle geckos are known to be very cannibalistic. Even in breeding them, breeders have to watch them because they will kill and eat each other. Gargoyle geckos are incredibly violent and aggressive towards one another, so whereas some people have successfully kept those female cresteds together, gargoyle gecko is going to be a huge no on that one. And another huge difference between gargoyle and crested gecko care is in their tails. So as you guys know, crested geckos will drop their tails for whatever reason that they see fit, but it never regrows, and then they are forever called frog butts. Gargoyle geckos can actually regrow their tails. My gargoyle gecko, I know I've told you guys a million times if you've seen previous videos, but my gargoyle gecko has actually lost and regrown her tail. She had already lost and regrown it when I got her, but the breeder that I got her from, which was Gecko Junkie, for anyone that is interested, they're at so many reptile shows down here, they told me when I got her that she had regrown that tail. So if you guys see pictures of her and she has a kink in her tail, that just happened when it regrew. But it looks pretty much the same as it would have. It's not like a leopard gecko tail that becomes a bulbous figure at the end of the tail when it grows back. If you are not fond of the look of a crested gecko who's lost their tail, or you want something that's a little less fragile, I guess, in that sense, then maybe look at a gargoyle gecko. Next up is their temperament. So first we'll talk about how in general their temperaments are, and then we will get to my personal experience in keeping both of these. So generally their temperaments are going to be about the same. The area that they differ though is going to be number one, in general, crested geckos tend to be a little more flighty. And what I mean by that is, especially as babies, if you are holding a crested gecko, they are very likely to leap out of your hands and splat in the floor because that is just something that they like to do. With gargoyle geckos, you don't have to worry about that as much. With mine, my gargoyle gecko let me handle her as a baby. When I would take her out, she'd just kind of hang out there even as a baby. Dexter as a baby would leap out of my hands onto the floor or onto the walls every chance he got, or he would scale up my body onto my head. Any chance he got, he was jumping and running and just so much energy, whereas Goliath did not do that. So that is something to keep in mind, especially if you aren't comfortable with handling super flighty animals. On the other hand, gargoyle geckos tend to be a little more defensive, which means that they are more likely to bite you. This can also be illustrated in past videos of mine where Goliath has decided to bite onto my tweezers as I am feeding her bugs and just not let go, and you can hear teeth, and that's just something that they happen to do. And for her in particular, it's just because her feeding response is just so much higher than my crested geckos. On the other hand, when Dexter, my crested gecko, was a baby, he bit me a lot. He would normally just wait in one little spot in his tank. Anytime I would walk by and it was around feeding time and he felt like he needed bugs immediately, he would slam his whole body into the front of that tank just to get my attention. And usually when I put bugs in there and I would hand feed him, he would just grab my finger and not let go. It wasn't painful at all, never drew blood. It was just startling and inconvenient, but in general, gargoyle geckos are going to be a little more bitey and defensive than crested geckos. Gargoyle geckos, though, do tend to have their own personalities more so than crested geckos. So crested geckos are usually a safe bet. You usually know as babies they're all going to be super flighty, and as adults they calm down and they don't mind being held, whereas gargoyle geckos seem to, across the board, have more individualized personality traits, which I thought was super interesting as I was looking at other people's experiences with the two and reading about them and talking to people. This kind of showed to be more and more true, so keep that in mind as well. Just because you get a gargoyle gecko and everyone says that their gargoyle geckos are the best thing ever, yours might not be, or yours might be wonderful. It's kind of just luck of the draw there. Another thing is that gargoyle geckos tend to be more vocal. This is not something that I have had the opportunity to witness, unfortunately. But gargoyle geckos are a gecko, and as you guys know, a lot of geckos can make sound. They can vocalize. Leopard geckos are a big one that will do this, especially as babies when they're scared. They make almost these croaking, chirping sounds, and gargoyle geckos can actually do that too. And this usually happens if you have more than one gargoyle gecko in the house. They will kind of chirp back and forth at each other, which is super cool. Again, I haven't got to experience that, but I have seen lots of videos of people who have, and I think it's super cool. But with all that being said, just know that animals do have different personalities, so you may get a crested gecko who is super aggressive and never wants to be held, even though it is pretty rare with crested geckos. And with a gargoyle gecko, who knows what you're gonna get? You may get one that loves being held. You may get one like Goliath here who will freak out if I touch her and she does not want to be held or touched or anything. It all could depend on your specific animal. And diets for these guys is another one that's going to be super similar. They are going to eat Pangea or Rapashi or some kind of pre-made gecko food primarily, and then be supplemented with insects. I have heard from quite a few people that the gargoyle geckos do tend to want to eat insects more than crested geckos, and I have lately found that to be true. For a while there, Goliath and Dexter were kind of going on the same cycle where they were both eating the Pangea and didn't really want anything to do with bugs. Dexter as a baby loved bugs, and then he stopped eating them altogether, and Goliath is now super into bugs. She takes them anytime they are offered. I just fed her today and she was loving it, and I tried to feed Dexter and he turns the other way. He doesn't want anything to do with it. So where I have heard of quite a few crested geckos who don't really want to eat bugs and they just survive 100% off of Pangea, most of the time gargoyle geckos are going to want more bugs than that. And last, we'll talk about which one is my favorite, because the first time I did this kind of video, you guys got frustrated because I didn't say which one was my personal favorite. So I thought I would throw that in here. For me personally, because of their temperaments, because of my personal animals' temperaments, crested geckos are my favorite. And that's just because if I want to hold Dexter, I can just walk in and scoop him up, and he likes being held. He likes hanging out with me. Goliath isn't that way. She was when she was really little. She would occasionally let me hold her, but ever since then she just doesn't want to, so I don't really get that hanging out time with her, and that's literally the only reason crested geckos is my favorite. I still absolutely love gargoyle geckos. I love Goliath so much. I love watching her hunt and perch on her little logs and violently attack any bugs I give her. Love her so much, but crested geckos are my favorite. But that is about all I have for this week. I just wanted to do another one of these comparison videos. I've already done one for bearded dragons versus blue-tongued skinks and one for ball pythons versus corn snakes, so I kind of wanted to do another one with two very similar creatures just to kind of give you an idea of those similarities, but more importantly, the differences between them. Let me know in the comments below which one is your favorite, because you might be able to help someone who is trying to make up their mind. Really quickly, just to throw into the end of this video, if you've made it this far, you probably care, so that's why I'm putting it at the end. If you've noticed that I've been kind of MIA from Instagram, and I've been taking forever to write back to comments on videos and messages I get on Instagram, it is because my house is being remodeled and I have been very stressed out and overwhelmed and working a lot. So I just wanted to throw that in there. I promise I'm not ignoring you guys, and I'm still writing back to comments when I can. It's just taking a little bit longer. As always, if you have not already, please feel free to follow me on my other socials and like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications every single time I put out a new video, which is every Sunday. This week's Instagram shout out goes to Witcher Exotics for following me on Instagram and going through and liking a whole lot of stuff. Thank you so much. You are the bee's knees. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye. So as you guys know, actually, really quick, I am back. This next one probably is going to defensiveness. Actually, okay. So we're and Bye.